All right, we're
This
live.
one.
Is it live for you?
Yes.
Awesome. Hey, y'all. Hey, everybody. I am here live on one of my first Substack lives in a while. I've been taking a break writing my book, and it has been turned in to my editor. So I've got some extra time to hang out with people I love talking to about stories and writing. And today I'm chatting with Julie Green, who wrote this fantastic memoir, Motherness. And we're going to be talking all about that, but also just about a few different things in her book that just really struck me. So first, let's start. Julie, introduce yourself to my audience, and then I'll do the same, and then we'll start chatting.
Sure. It sounds strange. I'm not used to even introducing myself anymore. So I am a Canadian writer. Gosh, I've been initially was a staff writer for a parenting magazine and then went freelance and then lo and behold got into sort of this more niche writing about autism and then was diagnosed myself 5 years ago. And that was the impetus for me writing this new memoir. So I am now an author as well.
Yeah,
I guess
and
that's
congrats for that. Y'all,
enough.
I
Thank you.
love this book. What I love about this book is that it is incredibly raw and honest. And I think that you made a face when I said that, but it's almost true when you write something and then you kind of forget that it's out in the world and people can see it. But what was so helpful about that to me is how seen it makes people feel when they read your story. So for anyone who doesn't know me, if you're watching this, as one of Julie's subscribers or someone has shared this with you, I'm Dr. Emily King, and I run the Learn with Dr. Emily Substack. And I am also a mother of neurodivergent boys, one who is autistic, and but I'm also a child psychologist with a background in school psych. So I write a lot about how school affects our kids, but there's always a crossover in parent collaboration and the adult experience of supporting our kids, whether that's educators or parents, or also just all our allies that we have in our, you write a lot in the book about like, where's the village? I know we're supposed to have a village. Like, where are these people? And so I don't think we're there yet as a culture. And I'm in North Carolina in the States. So we're coming at you from different cultures, really. And all of this is within that context. So I just wanted to start, Julie, with tell us a little bit about when did you first consider that you might be autistic, and how did that resonate with you in the context of your son's development?
Yeah, it was a real long,
It's like a
long,
slow.
convoluted process. I'll try to give you like the short and sweet about it. But basically, it took 10 years because when my son was diagnosed we're talking around 2011,
Mhm.
2012, we didn't, I mean, even the internet, like you just didn't have the information about autism that you have today. You didn't have all, the self advocates putting all this
Mhm.
information out there. So it was like scamper around, find the information you can find about autism in general, and that it's not Rain Man. Um, so let alone that was like a huge steep learning, let alone, I mean, it then took years later for me to think, I didn't, there was some crossover with my son, and I always use this idea of the Venn diagram. There was overlap in terms of like anxiety and sensory uh, challenges that we had, but really just so many differences that it didn't really cross my mind. And then I think through this like parenting writing that I was doing, um, I sort of was chatting with this mom of an autistic boy who ended up being diagnosed herself. And then the more I kind of started interacting with her, and she was maybe one of the first people, like women I had encountered
Mhm.
around my age range and everything, who'd been diagnosed. And I thought, oh, well, okay. If it can look like that, then now we're talking. And I sort of said to her, like, I'm really on the fence. Do I, don't I? I'm in my sort of mid 30s at the time. What's the point?
Mhm.
And then eventually it was alone sitting on the fence, and I just had imposter syndrome. And I just needed to know one way or another, get it over with. And so I spoke to my GP, and like my family doctor obviously knew my background. She knew I had a history of like mental health issues. She knew about my son being diagnosed. So she referred me. And yeah, I waited about a year and then eventually had my own assessment. So it was like a whole 10-year thing. It was not like one day, oh yeah, I think
Right. Right.
I
Well,
think it's more readily available now because there's just so
mhm,
much more information, and there's so much more information about like a
mhm.
potentially different presentation in girls and women.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of people feel how you felt, like, what's the point, right?
Yeah.
I'm an adult, I understand myself as maybe as well as I can. I work, as you can imagine, with lots of and have worked over the years with lots of parents who honestly, most of the parents who are in their 40s who have been diagnosed are white males diagnosed with ADHD because that's where the research was in the 90s, right? And so lots of women are not diagnosed, and lots of, you know, we get into this discussion of like higher support needs, lower support needs within autism. And many times you posted something really great yesterday, or I saw it yesterday. I don't know when you restacked it on Substack, but it was about that higher or lower support needs not having as much to do with autism, but as having to do with the co-occurring diagnoses of autism. And the more co-occurring diagnoses you have, obviously, the more support needs you're going to have. And that is also totally how I see it. And that was if y'all are looking for that, look on Julie's notes. She reposted that. That's such a good description. So it's like the parents who I see that, maybe didn't have anything co-occurring, and they were intelligent, they were able to get through school, like, but at what cost? Like, how hard was school for you? That kind of thing. So my question to you would be, even though you were like, what's the point? How did it help you to have a diagnosis, even if it wasn't access to services of some kind? How did it help? How did it change things?
Well, just even dialing back for a second as you were
Yeah,
talking, I think that's the great misnomer and misunderstanding that people have about the supposed, mild, or I hate all of those
I hate all
functioning
the words.
labels,
Right.
but that's that misconception that, well, look at you, you're articulate, blah blah blah. But those people tend to have way more mental health concerns, way more higher risk of like suicide. There's a lot going on there. So
Hmm.
the support needs may be different, but there are
Right.
definitely still support needs, and it's still worth, I think, being identified
Hmm.
wherever you are on the spectrum. So it's not like this person has fewer challenges than another person. It's that they're different
They're
challenges,
different.
perhaps.
Right.
Yes. So in terms of doing that, I think it's worthwhile at any age, honestly, because it reframes how you look at everything. Um, because people even say with children, like, don't label them. And, well, kids they're going to internalize labels anyway. They're going to be, whether they're ADHD, autistic, whatever, they're going to be lazy. They're going to be defiant. They're going to
Hmm.
be, my son was coming home saying he was bad.
Hmm.
I internalized a whole bunch of labels as a kid. I was, whiny, I was a princess, I was spoiled, oh god, you name it,
Right.
like,
Lots
a
of
whole
examples
bunch.
in the book.
Anyway, lots of it was into it becomes a personality issue, and it really it gets entangled with lots of shame, and it
Right.
really does a number on your self-worth. But when you're looking at this and you're looking at it from, a brain and wiring perspective, it changes everything when you have a different context for it. So, frankly, like, I feel better about myself now in my late 40s, than I ever have.
Hmm.
And I think that in itself is worth knowing.
Yeah.
It's just worth having that understanding and that piece of acceptance
Yeah.
at any age. I've had people reach out to me, in their 60s and 70s, and they're finding this out now. And
Hmm.
yes, there's like some sadness, and there's like, I wish I had known, my careers might have been different, my relationships may have been different, but I think better late than never.
Right. Right. And, everyone has a different experience with this. My, 2 boys, for their various diagnoses, were both diagnosed at 4, and one of those reasons is that because I asked, right? Because from my perspective as a child psychologist, I was like, "We need to get ahead of this and figure out what's going on." But it's going back to something you said earlier, my oldest was diagnosed in, I can't do the math. He was 4 and he's 18, so long time ago. To give you context, we had Facebook, but we didn't have Facebook groups. That's all. I mean, I think it was actually around
Different
I
world.
think it actually would have been 2011. Yeah, it would have been around 2011, so very, very similar
Yeah.
cultural time frame. And even though I professionally had a lot of knowledge about, like, what was going on with his development, that didn't give me the emotional support, the community, um, I still had things to sort out with my family and how extended family thinks about this and all of that. None of my professional knowledge saved me from any of that. And so we are light years ahead in terms of being able to educate yourself with conversations like this or things people are writing and sharing. Um,
You
but we
probably
still have
also
so
have
far to
that
go.
you probably also have that extra layer as well, like, because I have this professional background, I really ought to have such a more of a handle on this, like, even more
Right.
pressure.
So I did, you're absolutely right. I had this layer, which my husband has always been a steady balancer of that because he doesn't have the expertise, but, you know, can still feel the same way as I do, so it helps me see, like, the difference, so, like, to sort out that variable of the expertise, but, there is definitely this layer of I should be able there are lots of shoulds with that. I think sometimes teachers who are parents of autistic children feel this way, definitely therapists. You feel like, "I should be able to do this." No, no, we all have dysregulated nervous systems no matter how much we know about things, but I wanted to say one quick thing about evaluation and the timing of things, just as from my perspective as someone who's trained to do evaluations. I don't do them anymore, but I did them for 15 years. Um, there is this, I feel like there are kind of 3 time frames in life where evaluations feel different to people across the lifespan. There's, of course, like, the early intervention, diagnosis, which my kids got, and they don't know life without us talking about, their differences and their strengths. And then there's this, like, what I call this tween teen identity, and maybe even young adult identity type of evaluation time frame where they're struggling in school, they feel misunderstood, but they have to be on board to go through the process. You can't just, like, take your 15-year-old and that not tell them what they're doing, right? Whereas you can take your 4-year-old and, like, "You're gonna go play with this person, it's gonna be fun." And then there's, like, the adult version, right, of whatever comes after that. Like you said, like, you may not be looking for services necessarily, but it just leads to understanding. Um, so I wanted to chat about one particular story in your book that I loved because it showed, I think, your perspective of yourself and your son's perspective, and that is the time you went to the escape room. It was an outdoor escape room, to give it context, because it was during the COVID lockdown. Lots of sensory things about that I loved reading your experience, and then kind of your surprise at his experience. Will you tell us that story?
Yeah, well, as the great saying goes, it's been totally overused, but one person, you've met one person with
Yeah.
autism, you've met one person, so I'm constantly coming across that with my son. This whole book is like an exercise in how we're different, how we're the same, and even in I mean, I don't know. I don't wanna give a total spoiler for
Right.
that scene,
You
but
gotta
the
read the
way
book because it's really good, that one.
well, the way the book is structured, there's a bit of context and a bit of research, but it's not a typical, like, reported book with, all of that. I balance it with a lot of scenes
Yeah.
where and sometimes they're in second person, so they're you. So it kind of I try to put people very much in the situation so they maybe kind of get an understanding. So in this particular day, I thought it would be fun for my son and I. We're trying to discover this new city we'd moved to at the worst possible time during the pandemic when most things were just inaccessible, out of reach. And it started off great. My son was having a great time. He's really in his element, but I'm not. And that story progressively,
Mhm.
I guess, shows how I was being triggered and ultimately kind of ended up having a meltdown, and wanting to hide that from my son, but also just realizing he wasn't triggered by exactly the same things in the same way. But as the parent as well, I was like so cognizant of sort of keeping it together and as long as possible anyway until I got home and not wanting him to see me like that.
Mhm.
Like it also just a different experience because I think by then I had been diagnosed, but I still was coming to terms with understanding what things were triggering me and you can't always head things off and almost my own surprise at my own reaction and my own meltdown, um, and being seen by your loved ones in that light.
Mhm.
I mean, now I don't hide away. I do try to model a lot of situations for my son because I don't want him to be ashamed. I want him to know that there are certain things with my autism that are great, and we align with a lot of things. But there are also a lot of things that are hard, and they're hard for me. I don't try to hide it as much. But that particular day, I think I was surprised by the size of my own reaction because I tend to be the person who would normally shut down, get sick, be locked away
Mhm.
in a dark room. Um, but yeah, that day was kind of shocking to me because I had sort of a big reaction. But I don't know how much more you want me.
No, I think that's
I don't
great.
want
I
to
think that's a
totally
great teaser.
spoil it, but
One sentence you say that's talking about what you're describing is that I loved was, "He explodes while I implode." And I think that that is such a short, direct, incredibly descriptive sentence of what many parents can feel if you I mean, even maybe you're not autistic, but you might have sensory sensitivities, you feel touched out, you may have ADHD, there are different things that our kids can trigger us, and also we can notice these difference about environments triggering us in different ways, and I love the modeling you're talking about. Like, it's healthy for us to explain to our kids, "This is what my overwhelm looks like, and this is what your overwhelm looks like, and this is how I recover. This is what you can do to help." And I just that's the kind of honesty I loved about this.
thank you. Well,
Uh,
this is the tough thing as a parent too, because we're always expected to put our needs below our kids' needs. But there are times when, my kid will want us to do something or want me to drive somewhere. And I now have to say, like, sorry, I can't handle that,
Mhm.
or for whatever reason. Um, or I have to, pass trade off to my partner. I'm very lucky to have an understanding partner
Mhm.
who can often is sometimes out of town, but can often take over if I am struggling. And I think, it's important for parents and definitely neurodivergent parents to admit and get help. I never wanted to ask for help or get support in the earlier years when I was struggling. It was just, we power through till we burn out. Um, and we always defer to our kids' needs. And I mean, that is as it should be, but there are moments sometimes where you do have to try to compromise. It definitely makes some situations really, really tough as a parent. And yet, having that commonality also makes you closer in a lot of ways because you have a layer of understanding because of your neurotype that, maybe I have more empathy for. I
Mhm.
understand like my son is not overreacting, he's not being dramatic. Something really minor on a sensory level can
Yeah.
be very real to him, and I get that. And I'm very sympathetic to that in maybe a way maybe sometimes it would be harder for another parent to
Yeah.
to be.
And I love that you brought up you know, we try to help, we try to do everything for our kids until we burn out or until we get sick. And that's so true of so many of us. And I think that, I always put it in the bucket of, well, I'm a professional, so I should know what to do. So I'm just going to do all the things I'm supposed to do, ignoring my nervous system. Right. And so we all do different things at the cost of our nervous system, which is what we're all learning as adults. And one of the things similar to the story that that struck me was how you were able in some of those moments to look to your son to guide you, especially at the very beginning of the story when he was like taking the lead. And I wanted to read a quick part just to also give a flavor to everyone about the second person, which I totally noticed and totally loved about that because it makes you feel like it's your perspective, like the reader, almost the reader's perspective. So imagine an outdoor escape room in July. So you stepped out in the blistering July heat. The city is confusing. Not a grid, but a labyrinth of old limestone. You would consult Google Maps if you were on your own, but there's no need. Your 12-year-old already has all the streets committed to memory and now leads you to the location of the first clue. Within seconds, he's working through the logistics, and you struggle to keep up. Clearly, you are the Watson to his Sherlock, and you are more content to follow his lead. I just loved that so much because a lot of the work that I do too with parents is helping them step back and follow their kid's path. And I know that on that particular day, the story goes in a different direction, but I loved that part where he was taking the lead and you were, kind of having to step back because it wasn't your thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's also amazing at times too how we get to know our kids and we see them blossom and we see some of these I hate this whole narrative of like superpowers, but there are some amazing strengths.
Strengths, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean everyone we all have our strengths and like things are that are harder. And I totally lean into it. I'm like, that's
Yeah.
your thing, that's not my thing, and I love it.
I love it
I
too.
love
I do that a
witnessing
lot.
that, Same with, this was what's so great, with school environments. And I very consciously balanced the book to have not so much doom and gloom. There's a lot of humor deliberately because my kid's super funny. There's always funny stuff
Yeah.
happening, even in the middle of hard stuff. It's very like throws you. But also just the fact I wanted to give a balanced account of the school system.
Yeah.
I feel like for every truly awful experience we have with certain educators, there's always like one or two who like pop up and who are really rise to the occasion and step up for our kids. So I wanted to make sure that I put a few of those moments in there as
Mhm.
well, like a certain principal we had that like let my let my son like do jokes every Friday on the PA system.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
And
I
yeah,
remember
like
that.
there
Mhm.
were certain occasions that were great, but obviously a lot of like trickier. I mean, and we're still my son is 17 now and we're still, still butting my head against certain people within that rigid
Mhm.
system. Which is, why how I came across your work and was like, "Yes, where has she been? Where has she
Oh,
been
thank
when
you.
I needed her like 12 years ago or whatever?"
That's why I do it because
Yeah.
I needed this perspective 12 years ago and didn't have it. So I had, my clinical work, my education background in terms of graduate school, but I didn't feel like I was on the other side. So now that I'm on the other side and my son is a senior, having, lived through K-12 school with him, it is a gift to kinda look back and see, like, all that how far he's come, and I've just always taken it one school year at a time, and once they get a little older, you have to start doing a little bit more than one school year at a time because you have to start planning some things, but you're absolutely right, like, for every roadblock and hard meeting and people kind of not getting it, there are others that do. And I call these VIPs in my book, the very important people in our lives. Like, hang on to them. Like, these are the people you're going to send an email to when your kid graduates, even though you haven't talked to them in like 8 years. So that's the kind of thing that I love, talking about and making sure people remember. Like, it's not all um, good or bad, hard and easy. It is this like just continuum of messiness that has like joy and hard stuff in it. Well,
This
and
is
that leads me
yeah,
to
that's the thing
yeah,
too. I feel like it doesn't get easier, it just changes. There are
Yes.
always different things. Certain things sort of fade, and then there are new things, and
Mhm.
not to sound yeah, it sounds a little depressing, I guess, when you're talking to people starting out on the journey and stuff, but also it's made me a far more resilient person generally, and it's a very cliche, but, in terms of the advocating, because I just was so allergic to confrontation, I've had to really step up and grow as a person in order to help my child, which is a great thing. But yeah, I
Mhm.
think it just evolves. It's not like,
Yeah, it evolves and it happens so slowly over
yeah.
time. It I always tell parents, like, "You will be able to do this because
Mhm,
you will slowly adapt to it and figure out what the
mhm.
next pivot is or the next step is." And then what you can't predict, which is so wonderful, is all that funny stuff, all these joys, all these, like, hilarious things that happen or these interests that happen, like, I did not see that coming. I could not have ever predicted that happening, you know? That
Mhm.
is a wonderful part of this, and, we're almost out of time, but I did wanna touch on one question that, or connection we probably have that brings us back to just this idea of community is that when you're raising an autistic child, we have the perspective of like nearly 20 years of difference and like seeing how we felt back then to seeing, what's going on now. But some of it feels very lonely, right? Or it did back then feel very lonely. And then that gets into this idea of parents feeling like, not only accepting that this is our path, but also we can't get to the belonging part until we accept, right? And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on how this book is helping, because it definitely like I'm farther down this path with you, but it definitely helped me feel that belonging piece that I think we'll always be working on, right?
Well, and this is it. It's not a book full of answers, but I think I've already had a lot of people reaching out going, "Oh my gosh, like I feel a bit strange when people tell me, "Oh, I cried several
Mhm.
times. I folded pages." Great, but that's the idea, right? In sharing. That's why I cringed initially when you said, "Oh, it's raw and personal." It's super raw and personal, but that is the whole, like, point of a memoir. I think that's why you
Yeah.
have to almost override that little discomfort that you're sharing these really personal things in order to see the bigger picture that
Hmm.
it's gonna reach people who haven't seen themselves in a lot of stories. I know that's what I feel. I've written the book that I wish I had. There were a lot of moments as a parent and also just as a person, because I cover this whole area from my childhood, early adulthood of just feeling really, really lost. And I hadn't read or hadn't seen a book that covered a lot of these aspects. And I talk
Hmm.
as well about aggression because I felt even within the autism community, that is one aspect that even further cuts you off as a parent.
Yes.
We were very shut away.
Hmm.
We weren't sort of going places and being around people, and that element of being so cut off. I think at least if people are reading this and it's helping us talk about these things, and it's at least helping people see themselves and their stories. I mean, obviously every story is a little bit different, but through my story is sort of
Hmm.
reflecting what a lot of other people are going through and maybe haven't processed, haven't talked about. Like it was super cathartic for me to write, but
I'm
what's the point
sure.
of just keeping that to myself, you know?
Right.
But yeah, I don't like totally. It's not really an answers book, um,
No, it's
in
not.
that
It's
sense, the way
it,
yours is, but
right. And
it has its own purpose.
from my perspective of, as a clinician, I listen to family stories and have for 20 years. And every single family, of course, is different, but there are themes and patterns, right? So I appreciate so much that you talk about aggression, you talk about medication, you talk
Mhm,
about school, you talk about all these things that are the experiences that can isolate us because they're so different from the experiences of raising a neurotypical child who can, you're not having all these meetings, you're not having all these doctor's appointments, you're not being called by the school, you're not, problem solving, keeping everyone safe. Like these are all things that other parents may not have even crossed their mind because you don't think that that's part of your story until it kind of happens to you. So I just appreciate that you share it here because as much as I love the privacy laws that we have around mental health and family support, because of those privacy laws, it stops people from sharing their stories. We have this culture of really strict privacy around um, medical health, but also much more so with mental and behavioral health. And so one of the ways we can help connect is through stories and books like this. And you're right. So there's, what I love that about your book, but my book is going to be more helpful strategies for navigating school and navigating it's really learning in general, but about half of it is about navigating school and the other half is helping figure out how to nurture your kids' learning outside of school, because as I like to say, school is not the only place we learn, and we all know that is very true for our kids.
And that's going to
So I
be,
want to
I
leave
can't
people
wait.
with,
It's going to be
oh, thank
essential
you.
reading for, I'm going to, well, we're at the end of that journey, but I would love to just go back and hand it to absolutely every
Well, I
school.
appreciate that so much. So where can people find more about you?
So obviously we connected through Substack. I write every Tuesday on the autistic mom. The book is pretty much out everywhere. It's also in audiobook format now. I haven't narrated it, but I hear it's okay. I chose the performer, so that's essentially. Oh, I'm on Instagram as well. I'm not
Okay.
much one for social media, but my Instagram is juliem.green. That's that handle.
Awesome.
And yeah,
Okay, and
that's
if
it.
you
Oh,
hopped on here, like,
mhm,
halfway through, I'm gonna
yeah.
repost this on,
Great.
our Substacks and then also on Instagram, which I think will, like, double post on Facebook. I try to post just once and let y'all find it because there are a lot of platforms. And yeah, if people wanna know more about me, my Substack is, Learn with Dr. Emily, and then I am Emily W. King, PhD, over on Instagram and Facebook. And I do monthly parent workshops that are online live, but they always have a replay. And then I do a lot of professional development with teachers too. So I talk with lots of parents about trying to figure out how to bring me to your school. So that's something else that will happen alongside when the book comes out. The book is called The Neurodivergent Learner, and it is mainly geared towards parents of elementary age students because I could not fit it all in one book. My hope is that there will be a book for teens and young adults next. But I mainly focus on autism, ADHD, and twice exceptionality because I had to choose. It's tough. It's tough to get it all in one book.
Just
So,
clone you.
oh,
Just
well, thank
clone you a
you.
couple times and then
I know, right? And so I love this work because I'm able to put things out there and then people find them later. And I just, send me a message, comment on this, let us know what you want to know more about. And, Julie and I are here to write stuff. So I love hearing ideas of what people want to hear about because I'll write about it. Yeah.
this is great. Well, thank
All
you
right.
so much for doing this. Thank
Yeah.
you to the people who
Thank you for the
I
people.
thought,
I see all
"Oh,
these people on here. Thanks for
morning.
joining
Thanks
us,
for having your
everyone.
coffee with us." And
Yeah, I love it. And yeah, I'll see y'all in the comments. And I hope we were talking about the snow in Canada before we got on. So I hope y'all survived the snow.
thank you.
Okay. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, y'all.
Bye.